This is Chapter 7 and 9, The Industrial Revolution, discussion number 6, Progressing Toward the Progressives. During the Industrial Revolution, we also have some political movements to consider. These movements were primarily driven by women, as they were making their voices heard of what they thought would improve the world that they lived in. One of the first ones was the temperance movement. It was a movement amongst the women in order to encourage to restrict or completely eliminate alcohol from being consumed, primarily to improve the family life. Drunk husband comes home and beats up the wife. Getting rid of the alcohol would mean that the husband wouldn't be drunk. It would also make a better workforce, was the argument, because the people wouldn't be drunk showing up for work and show up on time and things of that nature. Also, women were one of the primary forces in the idea of abolition, and then after abolition, the idea of equal rights for the former slaves. And of course, they were saying if the slaves are going to have equal rights, why can't women have the equal rights? But one of the big issues that they had was the fact is that they could only talk because primarily in the United States, but across the world, women did not have the right to vote. And especially in the United States, led by the likes of Susan B. Anthony, Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Sojourner Truth, were these women who were going around saying that give women the right to vote. We ought to be able to have a say. Of course, some of the arguments against women's suffrage is that they're simply only going to vote the way that their husbands tell them to. So why should we give married men 2 votes, themselves and their wives, whereas single men would be disadvantaged then? Of course, a lot of them thought that women didn't understand the complexities of the political world, that they would be swoon over good-looking guys and wouldn't make responsible decisions, and all sorts of things of excuses of why they would not give women the right to vote. But again, these women's political movements did have a profound effect because we did get rid of slavery here in the United States. We did have prohibition for a while, and it was found that prohibition didn't work very well, and they did get the right to vote. So their efforts were seen to be successful. Another idea that came about during this time period is the idea that governments ought to sponsor education. That education should not be reserved for only those people who had enough extra cash to afford private education, and that governments, in sponsoring education, would create an educated workforce, and that educated workforce would be more responsible and more productive. They ought to be taught the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. Of course, those of you who can spell realize that 2 of those words don't really start with R, but that's how they came up with the 3 R's. But the idea of having better citizens because you had to be to school on time. You had to listen to the teacher. You had to get things done in a timely manner, efficiently, and they also instituted ideas of patriotism, that your country is great and that everyone ought to do everything they can to make their country great so that you would have that work impetus in order to improve your world. So again, creating of education was supposed to indoctrinate people. And we also have some religious movement coming out of the early and middle of the Industrial Revolution, as that we have this tremendous growth and no one really knows what to do with it. And then we have a lot of people who have hardship, who need help. And so a lot of Christian organizations came out of this time era. One that's very significant that's still around today is the Salvation Army. Was an effort by Christians in order to show Christ's love and provision and using the wealth that was being created to help those that were less fortunate. And that they considered it their Christian duty to help those in need. And so that was what they called the religious social gospel. Concludes discussion number 6, Progressing Toward the Progressives. It also concludes the combined chapters of 7 and 9, The Industrial Revolution.